All right, this is Brad. Yeah.
Got it. Mostly, a few windshields open.
Yeah, we all lock it.
Let's not forget. Here's my copies.
I do, that would be this.
Excellent.
And
Thank you.
can you guys mind sharing?
Yes.
We're not sharing here.
Okay. There you go. Oh, well, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, April 16th. This is the San Rafael Finance Subcommittee meeting. Calling it to order. First, I'll have open time for public expression. Not seeing anyone in the room. We'll get right to it. Director Advisor.
You know, I think you're okay with the order.
Go for it. Oh, yep.
All right, so the first item on the agenda.
Oh, did we
is-
do open time? Oh, sorry. Totally spaced back.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the first item on our agenda this morning is provide the committee with a preview on a agenda item we're working on to bring to council as early as first meeting in May. It's an update to the city's formal purchasing policy and its companion public works contract policy that are both in ordinance and update in code, and so there's a process for doing it. The memo that we provided with the packet kind of hits the highlights. There's not a lot of significant changes. I would say the main one to share with you and have any feedback is a recommendation that we increase the city manager's contract spending authority from the current $75,000 level to a place around $1,000 level, which is a significant change, but which are the reasons why we've landed on that recommendation. We can talk about that. Most of the other changes, and the council will see, we have, red line copies are, I'd say, minor kind of cleanup issues related to sort of the language that clarifies the application of the purchasing policy. Some of which we've already implemented administratively, but we would want to codify it in the policy. I would just say that the main one of that, and I had conversations with your predecessor when we got here, having to do with change orders to contracts and what requires what level of approval, and was really focused on the dollar value of the change as opposed to the dollar value of the cumulative contract. We've updated that internally in our administrative posting guidelines and the website. We also, and this is your finance director talking, really want to highlight the requirement in our current policy that funding is available, in the budget, in the line item contracts before they're executed. So it just helps ensure the internal controls around funding. That's the main one with the purchasing policy. I would just say that the two, I guess, rationales for the recommendation to increase the city manager's authority. And from the council's perspective, what that means is, anything over $100,000 would require council approval as opposed to the current 75,000. I'm actually in the process, having printed out like a year's worth of agendas, because Christine asked, honestly, there's not a ton of items that like fall in that window, so kind of why bother? One of the rationales that we'll put in here is, if it was a 2018, it's been a while since that was adjusted.
Yeah,
I mean, just
50 to 75.
just inflation alone,
7 years ago.
75,000 is now like 100 and plus, and so it's almost, from a purchasing power perspective, constant dollar perspective, is just updating it for it. The other sort of reason to do that, and we had just a little conversation for the meeting, is as we're implementing the ERP system and building in workflows and approvals, how Christine and the manager's office may choose ultimately to not necessarily out the gate, but ultimately delegating authority or at the director level, which is now at $10,000. So everything between 10 and 75 requires city manager approval. With the internal controls that we're building in the system, we're trying to still maintain and strengthen the internal controls, but also help kind of streamline the flow of, processing so that, you buy 4 tires and it needs a city manager's approval. I'm being facetious, but the amount of stuff, we've also some.
Can I just
Yeah, go ahead.
piggyback on that? This isn't just for like the convenience of me and my office, the amount of processing time, looking at the 2 directors to my left, it takes to like, we need to find ways to build capacity and make processes easier, manage risk, but still, I mean, I have full faith in this director team, but I think that the scope of what they're managing, to give them some more delegated authority to run their operation without the kind of bureaucracy of the churn, it feels completely appropriate to me.
Then how come it's to 20,000 and not more, given that?
So that's still like being discussed. I think, well, first of all, it's at 10,000 now, which is exceedingly, we've actually, and so conversations be had about.
What the number is.
I will say that the 20,000, not to pepper you with data, but one of the things that we've done also in talking to some of our consultants and best practices is when you look at the dollar value of purchase orders
Right.
and then the invoices,
Most of it.
basically 20K and below is like 50% of this. So instead of now, having authority for maybe 10% for April in public works, it's like there's nothing that's under. And so we're kind of targeting a dollar level that allows for most of the routine transactions and probably half or more of the transactions to be covered at the $20,000 level, but still retain eyes on the city manager. And then I would just say, hopefully, as we implement the ERP and the internal controls and ensuring that we have good tools to ensure compliance with the policy, there's obviously the opportunity for Christine or the manager to sort of, adjust that number, but we want to make sure that we've got a good system of internal controls and compliance in place. Because you'd say even 20,000 could be revisited, but we don't want to go too far until we've got our new system in place.
Okay.
But
And then the city manager would be able to, so does the council approve up to 20K and then the city manager could go up to,
No.
up to 30K
so what
or?
happens is if there's anything over 100K would be at the council.
Right,
Anything under 100 would be at the city manager.
right.
And then the city manager, through administrative procedures on an annual basis, can decide whether we stay at $10,000 for directors or they can move it up. But the council would be seeing any contract over 100,000.
Okay.
And if we're doing a change order, right, for an $80,000 contract that would be approved administratively under this proposed, if we're doing a $30,000 change order that puts it at 110, that would have to come to council because of the new not to exceed amount. Any questions on that?
Yes,
Okay.
when we think about delegation, are we thinking that the general use case is to directors, but, or is it as fine grained as, hey, I want to be able to, say, I'll make up a story, but, Director Miller wants to delegate down to a manager, say, we'll have a $30,000, or is it really just one use case that we're thinking of, like a permanent director would get, like an authority for the year, not just for a narrow scope?
Correct.
Okay.
And part of the way, I mean. Paul's part about it administratively, like we would have like we would have a policy that's like purchasing delegated authority from the city manager to. Directors at X, and then the discretion from the directors to their managers. Is up to them, like how they want to run their operation, and so. It's just really the level of the city manager's authority that the council is really authorizing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, my mind was going telling stories because it's very open-ended, but I think that's on purpose. But the main thing is to make certain that there's so then the director would have their own ability to delegate further.
Mhm.
Okay.
Just adding one thing to that, we sort of have that now, but it's like sort of informal. So part of what we're doing is we're formalizing. So it's documented, it's updated on a regular basis. In the context of the ERP, we're setting it up absolutely to allow levels of delegated authority. So that if we set it up initially with the directors at the current 10 or at 20, we don't have to go and reprogram everything if April wants to delegate to managers at a lower level. So we're setting up multiple levels of approval so that hopefully consistently across the board, but potentially department by department, we can we still need to formalize the process of director delegating authority because we need to keep the system in place. We're probably gonna ask the city manager to sign off on it because we don't want to have a situation where Christine's like, April, you did what? Until we get good at compliance on and the authority isn't just the dollar amounts, it's also they're kind of tied to making sure that at the right thresholds, we're doing the competitive bidding, and when we're doing informal bidding, that we're actually getting the number of votes that we need. So it's all about compliance with the requirements of the purchasing policy, not just arbitrary spending authority.
Well, and to that point, so I'm going to make up the story. You can tell me how wrong or right it is. But
Yeah.
so when a procurement is made, when it goes into ERP,
Yeah.
there's some connection to either, hey, this is an operations and maintenance expenditure, or this is tied to a capital approved budget item. How is that done?
That's a good question. You've done ERPs before. So yes and no, although we're one of the things that we're proposing to do, at least in terms of the internal controls, is other than at the council level, because at the council level, when you go to the public works contract policy, right, council took action, a number of cities where we're sort of using the government code, state government code for public works, and it actually got increased recently. It's now $220,000 is the threshold that requires competitive solicitation. So for public works, maintenance and construction contracts, that threshold is now 200 and about to be $220,000, which means it can be approved kind of administratively before having to come to council. So yes, we're definitely tracking whether it falls under the purchasing policy for services, supplies, right, commodities, professional services, or if it's a public works contract. I just need to clarify for everybody that doesn't mean the public works department. Public works projects are defined that most of it, 90% of it, 95 is through public works, but it's the body of work, not who's doing it, that triggers the threshold. And so that right now, informally in our system, and I have a link in our report to a website, I have copies of how we have it. There's all sorts of thresholds of delegated authority under that public works contract that honestly, April, I don't think we're actually necessarily utilizing, like 5,000, 10,000, 15. So we're going to align for ERP purposes the delegated authority between the two types of contracts other than at the council level.
Okay.
So that way there's not really the need to say, oh, if it's this type of contract that goes through a different kind of approval workflow, kind of making it consistent for ease of. That makes sense.
Yes, but I think I probably didn't ask my question the right way. What I'm envisioning is that, you know, the council, we approve a budget
Yeah.
at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
And then as expenditures happen, I was envisioning that, okay, this one is tied to this line item. This is an operations and maintenance type expenditure, and this one's more capital. So
Yeah.
is it really obvious when someone makes those procurements as it's delegated, okay, I have to make a very specific decision on where this is gonna hit?
Part of accounts.
Yeah, well, the decision is, you know, where is it budgeted, right? Is it in the capital? Because the capital budget is sort of budgeted over here. It gets a little bit tricky if it's like an elevator maintenance contract, which is, yes, it's a public works, but it's not a CIP, it's in the operating budget.
Right,
But the key is you have to identify the budget code for the purchase order requisition and or contract. Funding needs to be available, unencumbered funds available in order for it to even get through the first step of approval. And then it goes through an approval, like a workflow, so that the person with the appropriate spending authority, either as defined by the council for the manager or delegated, has to approve that for it to go through.
thank you.
So bringing it back up. Higher level. So 100,000, is this in keeping with other cities that have budgets around our size?
I'm gonna say yes, and I'm gonna demonstrate it to you. I will tell you that when we did initial comp survey, the communities in Marin County right around us are very different than San Rafael, right? You know, the large
Are they
spurs.
higher?
They're exceedingly low.
I'm more
Right,
thinking of
so,
Nevada, San
Yeah,
Francisco.
San Rafael, Berkeley's, those will generally actually be at or higher than
Okay,
this
so
amount,
it's-
so we're
it's-
not asking.
It's normalized.
It's,
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great.
The only thing I'll just say for full disclosure, also with April in the room, the one other change in the public works contract policy,
mhm,
and this is, I don't think there's a real practical implication, but right now the policy says that it's the director of public works that has authority up to, you know, 200/220 to award those contracts. We're proposing just changing it to be the city manager or their designee so that they can designate, but otherwise just the optics of this is that city manager has authority at 75 and the public works director has authority at 220, and there's a
mhm. Yep.
most policies and best practices, ultimately the authority rests with the city manager, and I think we will ensure that the April has the authority that she needs, but it's just changing it in the language in the ordinance.
Great. And will this be consent, or this would be an agenda, open agenda?
I believe it actually requires a public hearing
does,
because
okay.
it's an ordinance, so there'd be a first meeting. Part of the reason to have the conversation today and get it in front of the council in May,
Yeah,
first reading, second reading, and then 30
Okay,
days.
yeah.
Because we're not doing it as an urgency, and the idea is to line up the changes
Mhm.
with the start of the new fiscal year and the new ERP coming online.
What is the ERP online date-ish?
July 1. Fiscal year.
Is that looking good?
It's looking.
Looking, okay. That's a lot.
okay, this item,
Like I said, I would say generally we're on schedule, but there's still a lot of work to do, so I don't want to minimize the work. So,
it's great.
thank you for,
It's great as presented. Any other comments? Okay,
and I'll just end by saying that, because of some questions we anticipated, what we included in your packet is actually the memo that we sent to directors at the start of this fiscal year. They clarified the application of the purchasing policy. It's in your packet. And so some of the changes that we're bringing forward for the ordinance really just codifies what we've already implemented internally, so that there's clarification in the policy of how we're applying it.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on. to
Ready?
Measure D. At first I thought it said Measure P. I'm like, yes, someone talking about Measure P. I'm like, okay, no. Right.
So apologies for not getting this memo to you sooner, and I'm pinch hitting for, do you have enough there? I'm pinch hitting for John, and I'm gonna also refer to Catherine as our subject matter expert. So if I miss anything, or if I misspeak, just go ahead and interrupt me. And okay, so just to speak to the larger context, we are working on a 5 to 10 year kind of strategy on renewing the tax measures as they incrementally come up. Also increasing the paramedic tax and looking for other new revenue measures and ways to increase revenues to kind of meet the development service, the increase the service demand that's going to happen as these housing units come online. The good problem to have is that we are growing and we have to strategically plan for how to meet those service needs without, we've got to grow the revenue source somehow. So things like TOT, property transfer tax. So there's a broader strategy. We're talking about Measure D today, but I just wanted to make sure you're aware that at a future finance subcommittee, sometime in the next few months, we'll bring that big picture strategy to you. Measure D is kind of upon us because it's the first one to expire. So we really wanted to talk to you about this today, and it's a tricky one. So just the background on it is the special library tax. It passed in 2016 with 69% of the vote. It brings in 49 to 59. We're probably up to 59 now.
50, oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And so it expires in, when is the expiration date?
We're above
26.
59, so that was what it
Oh.
was raised to
With CPI.
in 2016, and then we've had CPI adjustments.
So it was like 80 something?
70,
70.
yeah.
Okay.
70.
So
With this year.
yes. So it expires
2026, June
June of 2020.
July 1, June 30th, 2026.
2016.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a couple of different options. I want to qualify something in this that's really important about staff's recommendation is we have an opportunity to do a special election in August 2025. That special election will cost us approximately $200,000. It does not look like locally anyone is putting anything else on that ballot. So we would have to carry that cost, which is pretty exceptionally high. Not holding out that anybody's going to add anything. I've pulled all my colleagues and they're not looking to do that right now. So doing the special election will be solely incumbent upon the results of the polling. So the next step, I'm jumping ahead, but I think it's putting this recommendation to do the special election in context is we've engaged Brian Godby to do the polling. He's going to be doing that in the next couple of months in time for us to be able to make the final recommendation to the council about whether we put this on the ballot for a special election or not. I think the date we have.
We're doing it in the next month because it needs to be just put on the ballot by May 30th. For August.
Right, so we would have to come to the May 19th council meeting to request authority to put it on the ballot for August 2025. We've built in the special election cost into the fiscal year 25-26 budget. So if we need it, there's budget there for it. The challenge that we're going to have with polling, and Brian and Charles Heath have validated this, is that there's a lot of tax fatigue. And at the federal level, there's a general overall sentiment that kind of DOGE is affecting us locally in this way, where people are really looking at tightening their belts and how much money they're spending. And it's a challenging time to pass tax measures. And then we also have the challenge of the relationship and the timing between Measure P, which is why we haven't gone with this prior. We talked with Charles Heath about it, and he said you really need some space and time between when Measure P passes and whether you bring this renewal forward. So that's what puts us in this position of do we do the special election or not, because that was the recommendation, was to hold off and wait. So the polling, in my mind, I think the original measure, pulled at 69. We've got to pass it 66. So this is a like, from the world of polling, Brian would say, go for it. Like if we were at 69, staff would recommend going to to the special election in August. If it's 67 or 68, then it's a really difficult policy call because we have June 2026 that we could go and it would be a much lower cost, bigger ballot, potentially more competition. Like there's all these trade-offs. And if we either didn't prevail in a special election, or didn't put it on the ballot, and we did it in June of 2026, we would still not have a revenue gap. Brings in what, $1.3 million. So that's a really, that's a significant impact in operations.
$4 million.
Yeah, so it's a third of the library budget. So we could prevail, or we could, it could pass in June of 2026. So the strategy here is it worth the risk and the, cost benefit to do the special election? Or not? And that's really gonna, like I said, it's really gonna depend on the polling. So we have scheduled, or we're in the process of scheduling a couple of meetings with actually all of the council members to brief them on the polling results before this would need to go on that May 19th calendar. So we can make sure we're really clear about, what the staff recommendation is and what we're gonna bring to the council. So this is a really tricky one. And I guess the worst case scenario is that we go to November 2026 and then we lose a half a year in revenue. And, obviously we talked to Catherine about like what would have to give. And it's things like, significantly reducing hours of operation, potentially looking at some not having a branch open potentially at all, just at that dollar amount. So there's a lot at stake and we're trying to do all the right things to put us in the most favorable position. So we wanted to have this discussion here and just get some early thoughts, answer questions, and think about that. What's that threshold percentage that that's going to really be the kind of go, no go on the special election decision.
So
Catherine, did I miss anything important there?
I don't think so.
Can I?
I mean, there's a lot of more details I can
no,
provide, but I think,
We can answer
yeah,
questions.
whatever
Okay.
questions.
So November of 2025, there's nothing on the ballot this November. That would still be a special election for this November.
I don't know that we could do a special election in November.
Okay, they're only allowed in.
I don't think
Lindsay
there
mentioned it would still be a special election and the cost was higher.
In
At a
November?
director's meeting.
as opposed to August.
Yeah,
Yeah, here's the distinction. The other factor to consider, especially when you're needing a 2/3 threshold, is not only the timing. An August special election would be, as I understand it, mail-in only election. So voter turnout is a factor when they do the polling in terms of when the folks that you need to come out to vote. And in April, because it's a mail-in, it's a lower cost. A special election in November would be, I think, required to be an in-person election, so they'd have to stand up
A whole
polling election. With polling places and polling workers, it has costs. So even though it's expensive in August, I think it's the cheapest special election, but it is a mail ballot.
So is that the same? So it's August of 2025. What about April of 2026? Or is that not one of the ones? Sorry, there's a lot. Okay, so it's either
It would be
August
August or June.
or June of 2026, and that would be the special, also a special election.
No,
That would
the
be
primary.
that would be the primary. So the cost would be like
Got it.
50 or something.
They've been about 80 to 90.
Okay.
80 to 90. And actually, that's what we budget. They've been less.
Okay.
Do you
I
have
have
questions?
a
I have
question.
Yeah, I have
I have a
reactions,
question.
but what are
Yeah,
your
so
questions?
I have a question on, we'll take this in sequence. Will we ever contemplate in the Godby question to voters in the polling, different levels of assessment? So if we're at 69, does it make it more attractive, or 59, does it make it more attractive to maintain a more graduated, or at least, I'm just trying to find a way that, how can we tune sentiment based on it? And then is that even something we'd want to ask, because 1.3 and year over year, it's going to keep increasing. We don't want to deviate from that trajectory.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but we're not recommending an increase, only a CPI adjustment. So it would be flat, it's just a straight up renewal, but was there
Okay.
another question?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say is like, if, would it make a difference to the voter that, even if it's just CPI, or even there's a way just to maintain it for a couple of years, if people are feeling uncertain, I don't know how we can construct.
You mean, does
measure-
the CPI affect the polling? Is that what you're getting at?
No, no, I'm just trying to say, is there a way to tune how much money people are going to be paying annually to make it say this is more attractive or not? Or is that getting too?
I think the straight renewal versus any sort of attempt to increase, that's probably where you're gonna, people are more open to just a straight renewal.
Yeah.
Versus trying to increase. And I think that was something that we discussed because in reality, we're capped at 3%. We know 3% hasn't been keeping up with costs. So I think down the road, particularly when we're looking at the new library and community center, we're gonna need to look at that in the future, but now's not the time.
So straight renewal is the recommendation.
Mhm.
That's the easiest way to get a 2/3 support for a tax measure is a straight renewal. Any increase opens up a whole other.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I just,
I would just say recently, I mean, this was 2 years ago, so that was a very different time, but that the county and San Anselmo had renewals of their library taxes, and they both passed with over 80%. Different demographic, different voter base.
And they didn't have, the main difference in my mind is they didn't have the Measure
That's
P.
also, yeah,
That's
a lot of difference.
It's really hard to know from a polling perspective how that's gonna land. And the folks traditionally who do mail-in special election voting tend to be an older demographic. Who are also paying really close attention to Measure P. Just like I'm just demographically, that's what Godby will tell us. So just factor that into, that could go multiple different ways.
are older voters typically exempt if they want to exempt themselves?
Yes. There's a senior exemption.
Mhm.
So they can vote for it, not have to pay for it?
Mhm.
So in this paragraph, it talks about for your August 2025, and if it were not to pass, and you can go get another bite of the apple the following year. I'd be curious to ask Brian, it seems to me that once people have voted no, you have to get them to neutral and then get them to yes. So what is the hit if it doesn't pass? Does it make it harder to pass in June? Like, I'm just trying to gauge that,
I think
or,
because it's special election versus regular election, I don't think the risk is that great. I mean, people do that all the time. They go for a special, they go for one, doesn't work, then they go for another. Typically, waiting another year would probably be advisable, but then we'd be in a revenue loss perspective, so we wouldn't want to do that. But it's a different, it's not completely, but it is a different set of voters. Does that make sense?
What's the voter turnout that's?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. It's like yeah. The proportion
So there was.
of voters is a different kind of statistical.
I was just sharing with some, there's sort of like a maxim in the polling that says that the folks that are gonna vote no are gonna show up at every election.
Yeah.
And vote no. Question is, do you have sufficient turnout to have the yes carry? So I think the polling is gonna be important also in terms of what the voter pool looks like in a special mail-in ballot election versus a primary in-person election. So, but that would be kind of rationale to bring it back because it is a likely is much more, could be more your voter turn.
so, I know Brian will look at the measure, he'll go granular on Measure P. I mean, I did a little granularity after the election, and the reason it was such a squeaker was because a lot of Terra Linda, those census tracts did not vote for it. So, I mean, there was so I would like to have more information from Brian, like where are you gonna get that
The voter.
2/3 vote? I mean, he can look at it because you can see who voted for it 9 years ago. He can lay that. I can do all this for him. He can lay that against Measure P and C. And then to me, then it would be, okay, we know that these neighborhoods are the ones that were really we're not supportive, so how do we have outreach there is kind of one thing I'm thinking about. What are their pain points and how do we meet those needs? How do we meet their concerns with whatever conversation is being had about why it's important? And then the other is, and we can figure out who it was, but the people at the very last minute who tried to stop Measure P. I have a sense of who they are. I'm not gonna say it here now, but I have a sense and kind of reaching out to them so they don't do that last minute stickering campaign everywhere. To find out what the concerns are. And my sense is the whole Measure P thing was actually related to the Carnegie, was very much tied. It was actually not about library services. It was very much this other
Keep their
thing.
Carnegie alive.
So, I mean, so maybe it's talking to the Keep Our Carnegie Alive people and saying this is
Mhm.
important. I don't know, what kind of my,
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's non-regrettable to, of course, do the God-be thing, and then we'll have a better sense of where that lands.
Mhm.
And even to the voters, to your point around the census tracts that we're not in favor, that we're further afield from the location of it. I think in my mind, at least, I tell myself the story that it's more related to the location, not,
I think you're right.
yeah, because it was
That's what I
located,
mean.
yeah, okay.
100%.
But the services is citywide, every location is
Yeah.
gonna benefit.
Interesting. So to that point, because in Terra Linda, and we don't know, because we're so far out on whether there's gonna be a library pop-up at the B Street Communities, I'm sorry, not B Street, the Terra Linda
Linda.
Community Center. I don't know if you can draw a correlation on that at all.
Well, there is a service level, like you need staff to staff a library there.
I will say that, I mean, currently we have the Northgate branch operating and
Right.
serving Terra Linda, and
Okay,
it's
that's right.
quite popular. It will still likely be open in August, whether it's still open next June will depend on the Northgate construction, right? We are gonna be looking at how we can continue to serve the need in North Santa Fe without an actual branch library, looking at things like lockers and programming at the community center, things like that. So
Like
that is
buses, is that an option?
buses.
Like, you know, the Marin County.
Bookmobile.
Yeah,
Oh, the bookmobile. I
bookmobile.
mean, that's, I think something we're gonna evaluate based on budget and capacity. I think holds pickup lockers is something where
People
are popular and could be, I think Holds Pickup is a big service we see at Northgate. So we are looking at ways to continue to serve North Santa Fe once Northgate is no longer available. Yeah.
And then, will Brian be in the polling, and I see that staff is recommending or suggesting at this point, same level, but for 9 years, and do we feel that trying to add on additional years to not put this on a future council? I don't know, back when I was on the council, I would have said 15 years. But again, I know it's one of those things that every aspect of it impacts the number of people that vote yes, so I'm assuming, I just have to ask a question.
It's a really good question. I think some of it has to do with the toggling of the other measures that are coming up, like Measure E and Measure R, and how those are potential competition for another renewal on this. So that speaks to kind of the bigger picture strategy, but I think it is a good question for Godby, which sometimes they'll do a split poll and say, would you vote for it if it was
20 years.
20 years, would you vote for it if it was 9? Would you vote for it if it was 6? And sometimes that can really inform kind of like the make or break.
Yeah. I think that would be helpful. I believe it's already
Interesting.
coming up. And then the other part, and I know you'll meet with each of the council members in addition. You started out by saying this is part of an overall strategy. I think that would be helpful for the council just to see the timing on that, because you're right, we have E. I don't know when C comes up, even though it's countywide, but just trying to get our heads around that.
And then the paramedic tax.
The paramedic tech, like, so mention that, but I don't have all those set in my.
And there is the complication with it is there's like a plan A, there's a plan B, there's a plan C, you know, if this doesn't pass, then what's like, how do we reprioritize what's next based on what our original plan was? So it is really like an iterative, one thing at a time. And I think with the federal government overlay and the concern about the instability of kind of the economy and the fears, there's just like a lot of fear, and that doesn't work well with.
It doesn't, or the other part of it, the way to think about it is that these are local dollars that can't be taken by a federal government, and that always resonates with our voters. I mean, we are holding on to our own future and our own destiny with this.
That's a good pitch.
And I think that's something we're working on with, kind of our community engagement team is. We are getting questions with the defunding of the National Institute of Library Science, like. What is the impact on us? And I think telling the story that we get less than $10,000 a year from federal funding. Most of our funding is from our local tax dollars. So we are working on a campaign to kind of tell that story. Just preemptively using the national discourse. And that this is a way to support something that you value in your local community.
Okay, and then the last question comment, and I know Brian, I think it's been changing with the times, but to ensure that the polling, if it's not all 100% phone based, like text based, that very few of us, he used to do the old call people at their houses and we're not, but that's just,
He's evolved.
yeah, it's evolved. I just want to confirm on that. Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot more texting and a lot more multimodal communication,
Okay.
if you will.
Okay,
So
that,
Well, Garvey's results have been almost spot on
they have
in the
been
last several elections, right?
every single one.
Okay,
Okay,
so
Which
he's
is a
reliable.
good track record.
okay. Okay, well, hopefully we provided some insight and it sounds like we agree with getting them polling information. You'll let the rest of the council know and we'll have more information when we get that. And then it would be, you had said May 19th. Here it also says adopt a resolution calling by May 30th. Can the first reading of the resolution be at the second meeting in May, or does it have to be the first one?
I would want to consult with Lindsay.
Okay.
And also another question would be, if not, could we do a special meeting for it or not? The answer is probably not, but maybe.
I don't know.
Okay.
We'll figure out the timing to make
Okay.
sure we get it in there one way or another.
Okay.
Any other questions on that?
So many, but none that we can answer right now. Okay. I know, right? Whew, I thought my broken foot was about the same about today. Okay.
So I am also pinch hitting for Micah and Stacy on economic development. We're doing like a divide and conquer sort of day because there's a lot going on in this
Okay.
particular moment. And I'm gonna
Thank you,
also,
Catherine.
thank you, Catherine. I'm also gonna rely on April as a key subject matter expert in this area because April and Micah's team have been working really closely on trying to figure out how to try to achieve compliance. We had a conversation at the Economic Development Subcommittee, and there's been a lot of community engagement and interaction with the business owners that have the straighterries that we're trying to get into compliance. I really want to appreciate April and her team, for Angela, Stacy, for the amount of high touch work that they've been trying to do, which is to kind of recognize how important the economic vitality of our downtown is and how important it is to support these businesses, but also how important it is to kind of protect the city. And we talked a lot about that. So one of the things we did was we reduced the insurance requirement in the aggregate from 3 million to 2 million. Because a lot of what we heard is that the insurance premiums are just like, cost prohibitive. And so we're looking for ways to kind of like meet them in the middle and be really creative. And I'm really proud of our team for being creative and working with folks and saying like, here's what we can do to help support you. If you got to take the streetery down because it's cost prohibitive to replace it or to get into compliance, how do we help you with an outdoor dining program that still gets you kind of what you're wanting in that outdoor experience, but resolves the compliance issues kind of, I would say once and for all. We've given like 2 years of kind of warning since the last ordinance went into place at the council. And we're now at the point where the letter that was issued in March said you have until April 6th to apply for a permit for the streetery, pay a permit fee, and provide your insurance. That risk is something that's really important to the city. This is the public right of way, and we really need to be mindful of that liability. So 7 of them, do I have that right? There's 7 left? 8. None of them have submitted an application to have a streetery, nor I think 1 has provided insurance and none of the others have paid any fees. One of the things that the letter said was that we will we want them to have the structures demolished by June 6th, I think. And April and her team are talking about what their role is in like supporting that process, because we have the capacity to do it. And we also want to be equitable. We don't want one of them to pay for the demo and then another one we do. So we're trying to figure out the mechanics of that. So Stacy is going to circle back with each one of them. And I talked to Andrea about this a little bit. I think it's important that we get a official acknowledgement from them that they are moving on and that they know that the city is going to demolish, because I don't want us to get into a situation with a business owner or a property owner where we show up and they're like, what are you doing here? I thought we were still working on something, or like, there's some confusion. So I think so just a simple email that says, we understand, we acknowledge the notice that we've provided. We would provide another notice with a very specific date for the demo, and just an acknowledgement that they understand what we need to do and why, and that they are abandoning their streetery, and in the meantime, we're still, staff is still working with them on, are there some alternatives? Are there other creative solutions, or going to the outdoor dining program instead of the streetery? Because they're two separate programs with separate applications. This outdoor dining has a much lower fee. And then the other piece, and then we'll open it up for questions, is that staff have been evaluating reducing the fees to reduce the barrier and to make it more possible for the business owners to also pay for the improvements that need to be made to get into compliance. Andrea has been looking at that because there is a legal analysis component with reduction of fees or fee waivers that we need to be really careful about, particularly when the ordinance says that these are what the fees are. So the city attorney's office is working on that legal analysis. So we don't have a formal recommendation for you today on what a potential fee reduction could look like. So it's going to take a minute, but we just wanted to give you the lay of the land and a status update on what we're looking at, what we're evaluating, and what we're considering bringing forward.
So I'm gonna add some more for Councilmember Hill's benefit. We had this at the Economic Subcommittee meeting, of which Vice Mayor Bushy was not there. And so the streetery came forward. We had business owners in here that gave input. The unfortunate thing was our agenda was really packed, so there was not much, we didn't get into a deep conversation. Since then, I've had other owners of streeteries reach out to me directly around the fees. And there are a couple issues. No one's disputing the compliance part. And I don't think any of us would dispute the compliance part. So let's say, that whatever it takes to have it be in compliance needs to happen. No one is also disputing the insurance part. And we did offer at the Economic Subcommittee that maybe the city writes a letter and says, whatever we say, to help them with their insurance people, right? So those things I personally am fully supportive of, and so were the streetery folks. Where the tricky thing is, are the ones where we might want to say we have discretion, and we could sit here and debate whether we have discretion or not, but let's say for the sake of the argument, ones that we would be discussing. It's the permit fee, it's the fee for removal, like the deposit, so it's permit fee, deposit, and then the cost to rent the parking stalls or to own the parking stalls. And there, with help of my online AI friend, did a deep research of all the ones that are in the Bay Area, because I don't want to compare us to Larkspur or Madera because they're different. So really looking at one of our size, kind of bigger. And what came forward in that very brief, AI looking at it, is our cost for the stalls is much higher. And kind of to what City Manager was talking about, the legal aspects of it, they're all done a little bit differently. Like the ones in Berkeley, they have lower fees, but they're also allowed to the public when the streetery is not open. So there have been some really creative things that were done in the East Bay around this to try to get the fees lower down. And I think that is something that's super interesting. The policy part, so that the staff has the fee part and really look at the granular, but the policy part is, as a policy, do we support having streeteries as part of our downtown? Well, let's just talk about downtown, even though we have them elsewhere in the city, but really that's what we think about, part of our downtown experience. And if it is, when that is a priority from an economic development committee or approach that maybe the city is willing, I don't use the word subsidized, but really recognizing the trade-off because of the foot traffic brought in with people's streeteries, that vibrancy, it's hard to calculate that, but there is a benefit there. In addition, the businesses there all bring in additional revenue by having streeteries. So there is a benefit to us attached. I mean, it gets complicated quite quickly to compare the different financial buckets. But in the work that I've done with it, we haven't had a chance for all of us to sit down since there was some email traffic on this. My hope was, I believe that this council has been clear that the economic downtown vitality is very important to us, both from the economic and from a heartbeat of the city. So knowing that, how can we work harder and be more creative to bring those fees down? Because I've been told flat out by the providers that have current ones that are built. So if you go through the ones that are currently built, there is no way that they can bring it, given the current structure of this, what's been currently presented, that they can meet that financially. It makes zero sense for them. So we're in effect saying we've created a program, and by adopting this program, we're willing to have the streetery program go away. And that's the part that I want us to wrestle with, because I know how I feel about it, but anyway, so I'll stop there.
Yeah,
So,
and even, I might even add too, because I've heard some of what the businesses are saying is that some of them have invested a lot of their own money to have them built. Some of them, I think we saw during the pandemic, were very shoddily built, but some of them, they invested a lot of money in, so they want to get some return on that.
taken into.
So yeah, I think as a policy, I think I'm wrestling with it too, because there's certain thresholds of, what degree are we willing to subsidize it in several ways in terms of fees, to the point where it no longer serves a public benefit. And I think the most immediate question that I heard you pose, Christine, is we're in the middle of a compliance process right now with them where the vast majority have not met. And so it seems like one of the more immediate decisions operationally is, are we going to give them, while we're analyzing it, a little bit more of a delay on, because some of those dates have already come and gone.
Mhm.
So where are we as far as we've said what we're going to do, then we're not doing it. So what I'm hearing is that there's a path where we could still provide some degree of tuning where we wouldn't go straight to demo by June. Is that what I'm hearing?
So let me back up for 1 second. We did already do one delay. So I think the original notices went out in January, February. And we got some feedback and we said, okay, let's kind of reset and give them a little bit more time to get the permit together. And so we gave them, I think, an additional month or 6 weeks to get.
3 months, roughly. But it was originally supposed to be March and then we pushed it out to June.
But when was the original notice sent?
They were sent to
Early
January,
January.
February, and
That's what
then.
I'm talking about.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the original, like you gotta apply for the permit was in February and then we pushed it out till early April.
Yes, for the 3 that can't come into compliance, correct?
Okay.
There's a distinction, but.
Okay. So back to your question, I'm sorry, Eli, about your question about kind of like,
Okay.
what do we do between now and like, what they've been noticed is that if you don't apply and get into compliance, we need you to remove the thing by June 6th. Is that correct? Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Make sure I'm accurate in what I'm saying. Okay. So if one of the businesses came to us today and said, and we are working with at least one and maybe others, hey, and we've offered this multiple times. April and Micah's team have said, if you want to come and talk to us about what your alternatives are, if you can't pay for the actual streetery structure, we'll work with you. We'll try to be as creative and collaborative as possible to keep the additional revenues for you, to keep that foot traffic vibe and kind of meet them halfway. They're not coming to us with those asks. So we're a little bit in that, like, okay, do we assume that they are not moving forward with it because we haven't heard from them, which speaks to my point earlier about getting some like formal or written acknowledgement that they are moving away from the structure and recognizing that, or do they want to do something else and work with us? So we're totally open to that, and I don't want to speak out of turn. But if one of them came to us today and said, I really want to get in compliance, I got my insurance, I'll give you my insurance, and, can I have a couple of months to, there's different levels. I mean, Mary Kate, some of it, they have told us it's cost prohibitive to get into compliance, but others may be able to do it without it being cost prohibitive. I mean, or it's up to them, really. So I'm kind of answering your question kind of in a squishy way, which is like, it kind of depends. But we're not getting that feedback from them. So we are doing another outreach right now to say, is there anything you want to work with us before we move forward to this demo phase? So I feel like that's the best we can do with balancing the needs of the businesses and economic vitality and the compliance piece.
So what's frustrating about that, so I had heard the April date, and then I was understanding there's a June date, so I didn't realize June was the demolition date. I thought the April date, anyway, moved back to June, so even I'm confused about that. What I'm worried about is that you're talking about we're not connecting and have that conversation with the businesses, and you're having a one-on-one, and Stacy's having a one-on-one, but if we're gonna have a program that applies to everybody, what I don't see happening is having everybody in the room and saying, this is what the program's gonna be, this is where we can change, this is where we can modify, and getting feedback from everyone. And as I said, in that economics subcommittee meeting, we had 3 different owners here. They got to say 2 minutes, because that's the structure of our meetings. It was not set up as a streetery only meeting, but a streetery only, it wouldn't be a 2-minute thing. They would actually be able to talk about it. So I feel like probably one of the reasons you haven't heard is what I'm getting to, and this is my sense, is they had the 2 minutes and they kind of feel like, well, I don't know what's going on. I haven't had a chance other than talk with April and team, which you guys are using one set of factors for the criteria, which is what you're supposed to be doing, and they haven't had access to policymakers about it other than calling me up and talking to me. I'm sure they're going to call you up and talk to you. So part of, I guess my question is, would it make sense as part of going through this? Because we don't want to get on the same page. Is having a meeting with the 6 people and saying, we're gonna have one program, because otherwise we've had 7 different programs or 8 different programs for each streetery, basically, is what I've learned over the years, is that everyone has different factors. So we work with each of them, kind of, they're all unique. And what we're trying to do is get them all in the same, to have those folks in the room. We can name off the top of the head who those 7 people are and saying, we're gonna have this conversation. This is where the fees are going to be waived. Maybe the permit fee is reduced to 0, or maybe there's a phasing of the fees. But to me, what feels really uncomfortable is I feel like at this point, we're forcing this, not forcing it, but it's being put on them. And I feel like I don't have the full conversation. I haven't been able to hear both sides. Like, to me, to have everyone in the room talking and we're sitting here listening would be great. Because otherwise, again, using Eli's thing, I'm making up stories in my own head about how this is unfolding, and maybe that's accurate, maybe it's not. When I talked to one of the owners who has put a lot of money into it, and it just, I can just feel that disconnect. And so it's not that we're not willing to make a hard choice. It's not that we're not willing to have a program that is robust. But doing, for me, having it done with the disconnect in place doesn't feel right to me.
So you're proposing, Mayor Kate, just to be clear, that we might have another subcommittee meeting, but maybe it's more, maybe, I don't know if it's the right place for the finance, if it's more ED.
It's up to city manager, but to have that and to say to the 5 people that we hear from the most, who have the most to gain and to lose, come to this meeting, we're gonna talk about it. And again, it's not that we're not willing to make the hard choices, but I feel like there's still so many disconnects there.
Well, yeah, and I think too, when the because the streeteries came before the council, has come before the council a couple of times, when it was as a policy established, my belief, it's just a belief, is that the entire council didn't imagine that it would get to a point where the threshold would be unachievable. So
Absolutely.
that's a big,
Yeah,
so it's a
say
big.
that better.
Can I just add something?
Please.
I know we keep talking about waiving the permit fees, but I just want to add that this program is significant staff time, even if it works out and people can afford the fees. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of this as policymakers, that staff that could be subsidized by development fees are the same people who are doing this. So if we have 0 fees, that means our staff is doing work for free. I understand it's for the community, but these are the same people who do get reimbursed by developers for their time.
Mhm.
So I just want to make sure that, I mean, like, even the amount of time we've spent to date, and I know that obviously the program needs to
Yeah.
change, but I don't think we thought about that, and just the time commitment and the stuff that, like, when we try to, figure out what needs to be done, and we're looking at our goals and objectives, this program has been a significant lift for, which is essentially 7 businesses. I'm not saying that can't still be the
Yeah.
case, but I just want to inform you that it is a significant lift.
No, I thought that's helpful, and it maybe it's, so the permit fee, again, that's what I'm trying to figure out, the different kind of fees that are associated. So maybe the give that the city does is not on the permit fees based on what you said, it's on the stall use, whatever, the reserving the parking stalls, so maybe that's where that number is, I mean.
And that's exactly what we're looking at is what
Yeah.
are the component parts of it?
Exactly,
And
Yeah.
then, Andrea, I don't know if you could add to why, I'm, and not to go into the weeds on the legal analysis. And AB 206, just maybe that piece of
AB
26.
Prop 26.
I'm sorry, Prop
Thank you.
26, and how that analysis needs to happen when we're looking at any fee.
Yeah.
Reduction.
There's a general rule when it comes to city fees and charges that they need to represent the cost of providing that service or benefit to the person who's receiving it. That's just sort of the general rule. And then when you look at waivers, you need to understand, well, what does that mean if you're gonna waive the fee for somebody, but not for somebody else? Who's gonna pick up that cost? Is it the city picking up that cost? What you generally can't do is, one permittee gets the waiver, and you can't have another permittee pick up that waiver.
Like subsidize.
right,
And so it's just making sure that any waivers or reduction of fees are compliant with Prop 26 and any other applicable state code provision. And that it wouldn't necessarily undermine any sort of analysis that we've done to support other fees in the city.
makes sense.
Mhm.
Well, and I, having that explanation, because again, as policymakers, if those are all the constraints that we have, and so we're sitting here with the 7 owners and saying, because of Prop 26, because of our permitting, because of this is the best that we can do. That conversation, or maybe that conversation has been had, but that's not how it's landed. So,
We have not had that conversation about fees, but we have been consistent in terms of, what the program parameters
Mhm.
are. And as April has mentioned, it's not that it's 7 different programs, it's just the way in which the structures have
Oh,
been
yeah.
constructed and the site conditions.
yeah.
Mhm.
So they have different issues to address.
100%. And that was something that we recognized, and we really appreciate you and your team, because they have, as you said, it wasn't, I remember you saying literally like 2 years ago, this is one program, it's like 7, program with 7 different flavors. And so we get it, and cities, we don't want to have custom made programs. So I think we agree with the underlying. Would it be possible to call in the 7 people, who the ones that have been the loudest, the ones that are like, you put this program in, and the city's, you're removing my structure in June.
I have a recommendation about
Please.
that, but I think it would require some, and there's a couple of different options we
Okay.
could go to kind of address your concern about, like, how do we have a community conversation about this?
Thank you.
Which would
Yeah, that's a good way to
include the
put it.
chamber. And I think what's tricky about it is, so let me tell you what my recommendation is. So is that we do an ad hoc subcommittee for the Streetery program. I would recommend, I'm looking to my Brown Act fellow, but I would recommend it be the mayor and vice mayor.
But the vice mayor is gone until May.
But if it's ad hoc, then we can have her,
It's a difference.
if it's these are the options.
okay.
I think there's 2 things. There's a program.
Yeah,
And then there's the fees.
Mhm.
And so the fees, any fee changes would still have to go to the council.
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of the Brown Act question. The reason I was thinking of the vice mayor is it's the policy level, the capital P of what we're doing, but I'd be open to either way. But doing an ad hoc committee, not for it to be like a long-standing ad hoc committee, but like a meeting or two. And then the only thing that I would advise and want to be mindful of is that it be a conversation about listening and not making decisions in the moment and not like,
Mhm.
trying to make sure that we're not negotiating in real time
Right.
about individual issues, that we keep it at the policy and program level.
No, I appreciate that thinking. I do think, to me, this is the right place to have it, because yes, we have the policy, but the problem is, or not the problem, what we're running into is the fee structure is what's running against the policy. So for me, we fix the fee structure, or we at least can understand that why the fee structure is the way it is and it can't be changed, then that's informing the policy. It's not, that's what we're running into. So my preference would be to have it be at the subcommittee, be Councilmember Hill and myself, also because he's District 2, which is the downtown, and if he's not in that meeting, let me tell you, the first person they're gonna call as soon as they walk out is Councilmember Hill. So that's what I would propose, and by talking, having a listening session, I think it's great, call it a listening session. It did not feel like that at the economic subcommittee. It was not a listening session. They each got 2 minutes and we were on to the next thing, and there was we didn't have the time, wasn't the time or space to respond to the things that they were giving to us as input. So.
So I guess a brown-out question I have is, we just have a community meeting with Councilmember Hill, this is his district, and the mayor, without calling it an ad hoc subcommittee. Is there any reason why we can't have a one-off community meeting with 2 council members?
Well, I'm kind of hearing two different things.
Okay.
What I'm hearing is from the mayor is we need to figure out the fee issue, because that's what's driving it right now. In which case that is appropriate and within the jurisdiction of this subcommittee. And sort of the policy would then just flow up to the council once you figure out the fee issue. But I guess if it's a larger discussion about, well, I think you would still want to notice it as part of whether it's, who's on the Economic Development Committee?
Vice Mayor and myself.
Oh, okay. So it's
But I don't think we're changing the policies. So my sense is the fees aren't matching what I think the policy is, so I want to delve in. And you know me, I don't want to get in the operation stuff, but this is really an outlier. So that's why I want to have that conversation around the fees.
right. And that sounds like it would be
Prop
appropriate
26 and all that
to
stuff.
notice it up for this meeting. And we don't have to go through, you could have a special meeting of the subcommittee and just have it be that item. We don't have to put any other items on, and you can expand how the public participates.
That's,
I
yeah,
think the one sort of Brown Act challenge is like, well, if so-and-so got 5 minutes to speak and so-and-so,
That's exactly why I was
they
recommending.
want
ad
to
hoc
speak for
committee.
10 minutes, that's a little bit of the challenge of a Brown Act meeting. But I can talk with Rob and see,
Make a suggestion.
yeah, go
Yeah.
for it.
If the thought is, formal committee versus ad hoc in order to have more of a discussion than your 2 minute, could a committee not agendize like a workshop
Yeah,
and have a single
Yes.
subject workshop? And you still gotta manage the time allocation, but you have to do that in any meeting.
Why don't we, just since we're also
Okay.
mindful of time, why don't we take it offline
Okay.
and talk about kind of the pros and cons, and then, Mary Kay, I can follow up with you on kind of
Okay.
what our final recommendation is on
That'd be great.
how do we
okay.
do that?
And I do understand the Vice Mayor could call in, and I'll just say again, why Councilmember Hill, I think having it in person, getting the 7 peeps to have their 5 minutes workshop, whatever the format is, because I feel like that will, whatever happens in that conversation, whatever the listening we do, it will enable us to move forward and with more confidence than I have right now.
I think the only other thing is, in the meantime, the last message we've received is we're in demolition phase right now, so
But there are active outreach from Stacy right now to every single one of them, like this week.
to say what?
To say, hey, how are you doing? We didn't get a permit from you. Are you still interested in working with the city? Do you want to talk about alternatives? Want to make sure you know, like, we're doing everything we can for you. So that's happening right now.
Sure, but I'm thinking that if this is formulating, I don't know how you get. Just at least socialize the idea that, hey, something like a workshop is coming.
Just email
Okay.
them or somebody, would probably Angela will email them and just, but I want to figure out the format before we do that outreach, so we're synced up.
And thank you. I know that Streeter, you talk about a program that's taken an outsized effort across all departments. Department of Public Works is everyone else, and that's why some cities and towns have just removed the Streeter program 100%. So we know that as well. So thank you. We're almost there. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel in this program. So thank you. Future agenda planning. About that.
Budget, development impact fees.
Right now, we're on
Big items.
calendar for, I think, May 6th, contingent on schedules working, so
Okay.
selfishly, just having a date that we can shoot for, is gonna be helpful.
Does that still work for you, Councilmember Hill?
Yes, which date again?
August 6th?
Yeah.
It should already be.
Okay, if it's already scheduled, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Fantastic.
and for that.
Thank you all.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Thanks, April.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Like with the,
Turn off.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Hope
Paul.
you don't have to wear that.
Oh, I think I will.